My family history. In 1799, Phineas Nunez Cardoza was born in the East End of London. He was a member of the Bevis Marks Synagogue, a Spanish-Portuguese Sephardic Orthodox congregation. His family was originally from Portugal. In the 1500s, they left Portugal for Holland, and in the 1700s, they left Holland for London. In 1823, Phineas marries a British woman named Sophie Isaacs, and that same year they sailed to Rochester. Even though Phineas was a tailor by trade, in Rochester he worked as a trader. In 1824, Sophie Isaacs, at this point Sophie Cardoza, gave birth to a girl who they named Julia. In 1856, Julia Cardoza marries a man named William Guggenheim. They were married in a synagogue called Temple Brit Kodesh. Temple Brit Kodesh was founded in 1848 as an Orthodox synagogue with 12 members, and it gradually reformed between 1848 and 1894. My family reformed with it. Now, this William Guggenheim has a history as well. His family came from England to America in the early 1820s, and he was born in 1823. His mother was pregnant during the voyage. William Guggenheim later on became the vice mayor of Rochester and was also a colonel in the Civil War. He was obviously able to live very well as Jew in America, given those occupations. William and Julia then have 6 children, one of whom was named Isaac. Isaac was born in 1857. He was brought up a Reformed Jew and became an entrepreneur making cosmetics for actors. Sadly, his new business was not that successful. Isaac then gets married, and in 1898, Isaac's wife gives birth to William Guggenheim, named after Isaac's father. William was also brought up Reformed. He modeled as a youth for his father's company and modeled in his 20s for a clothing company called Steinblock. He then joined the new U.S. Navy and met and married a woman named Jeanette Kirstein. He then worked as a traveling salesman, marketing clothes, and then managed major department stores and was very successful. He first managed stores in his hometown, Rochester, where he had 2 children, Len and Loris. He then went on to manage stores in various other places. New York City. Then Washington, D.C. Then Baltimore. And finally, Cleveland. In Cleveland, William joined a synagogue called The Temple, commonly called Silver's Temple, ran by a rabbi with the name Abba Hillel Silver. It was one of the largest synagogues in the United States, and at that point, William and co., along with the synagogue itself, were very reformed. As I mentioned before, while living in Rochester, William had a daughter named Loris. And although Loris was born in Rochester, she spent the majority of her life in Cleveland. While living in Cleveland, she attended the Temple, which had become extremely reformed. For example, there was barely any Hebrew, and at one point there was even services on Sunday. Loris then went on to marry Gerald Horwitz in 1957 and gave birth to James Horwitz in Akron, Ohio in 1960, then Diana Horwitz in 1964. James, or Daddy as I know him, was born on August 25th, 1960, and was brought up in Akron, Ohio. His parents joined a congregation called Temple Israel, Reform, but far more traditional than the Temple. For example, my dad had a bar mitzvah. He was the first person in his family to have a bar mitzvah in at least 100 years. He then moves from Akron to Washington, D.C. In Washington, he joined a Reformed congregation called Washington Hebrew. At Washington Hebrew, my dad goes on to marry my mom, Denise Tannenbaum, in 1996, and she was brought up Orthodox. They were married by 3 rabbis, 2 Orthodox and 1 Reform. In 1997, they had a child named William, me. In 1999, they had a child named Jared, my middle brother. And in 2001, they had a child named Joey, the baby of the family. I was circumcised by an Orthodox mohel, and an Orthodox rabbi was present. As a compromise, due to the fact that my dad was brought up Reform and my mom was brought up Orthodox, the three of us have been raised conservative. Somewhere in between.